Is addiction an enemy or a hidden guide? What if it's trying to tell us something we can't see? Imagine being lost in a stormy night, spotting a lighthouse in the distance. It seems intimidating, its lights flashing through the chaos. But perhaps it's the only thing that can guide you to safety. Addiction, in many ways, can be like that lighthouse, something that initially appears to be just a problem, but upon closer examination, reveals a hidden message. How many times have you found yourself trapped in a cycle, that habit that seems to bring temporary relief, but deep down only intensifies a sense of emptiness? It could be something obvious, like smoking or drinking, or something more subtle, like compulsively checking your phone, working to the point of exhaustion, or relentlessly chasing validation from others. Whatever form it takes, these behaviors carry clues about what's happening within us and about the world we live in. In this video, we're going to explore addiction through a different lens, guided by thinkers like Jung and Gabor Maté, who view these behaviors as symptoms of something deeper. After all, addiction isn't just about chemical substances. It also hides in modern routines that seem normal, but keep us disconnected from ourselves. So, here's the question. If addiction could speak, what would it reveal about who you are and the way we live in society? Have you noticed how some of life's problems behave like warning lights on a car dashboard? They're not there to annoy us, but to alert us that something needs attention. Yet our first reaction is often to turn them off, or ignore what they're trying to tell us entirely. Addiction, in a way, is like one of those lights. It's not the problem itself, but a signal that something bigger needs to be addressed. Gabor Maté, a physician and author, describes addiction as a search for something that never truly satisfies. He says, "False needs never leave us fulfilled." Think about it. That cigarette, that drink, or even the endless scrolling through social media. These aren't just bad habits. They are attempts, albeit flawed ones, to answer a deeper call, like someone searching for water in a desert and ending up drinking sand. We turn to addictions for comfort because we can't access what would genuinely satisfy us. But what if we stopped treating addiction as an enemy? What if, instead of turning off the warning light, we tried to understand what it's signaling? Perhaps our addictions are pointing us toward what we're avoiding: suppressed emotions, existential voids, or even pains we've never allowed ourselves to process. Every compulsive behavior, no matter how destructive it seems, carries an unspoken question. What's missing here? True change begins when we stop seeing addiction as a character flaw and start treating it as a message. A call to look deeper within ourselves sometimes. What shapes who we are isn't what happened, but what never happened. It may sound strange, but silence can be as impactful as noise. Imagine a child growing up in a home where they never hear words of encouragement or experience, gestures of affection, even if everything seems stable on the surface. The absence of these small but essential demonstrations of care creates an empty space, an invisible hole that is often later filled with addictive behaviors. Silent traumas, like emotional neglect, are hard to recognize. They don't leave visible scars, yet they profoundly affect the way we connect with the world. Recent studies show that dysfunctional environments, even without overt abuse, can impact a child's brain development, altering their ability to manage stress and emotions in adulthood. It's like building a house on unstable ground. The structure may look solid, but it only takes a storm to reveal its weaknesses. Now, think about two children. One grows up hearing, "You can do anything," while the other never hears a word of encouragement. The first carries the belief that they are capable. The second may spend their life trying to prove their worth in indirect, often harmful ways. This is where addiction comes in. It can become a way to numb that sense of inadequacy, or to fill the void left by words that were never spoken. At its core, silent trauma teaches us to survive without complaining, but it also pushes us further away from our true needs. By ignoring these invisible wounds, we create fertile ground for compulsive behaviors. Recognizing this pattern isn't about placing blame, but understanding that, for many of us, addiction is a desperate attempt to heal what was ignored or neglected. Imagine waking up and grabbing your phone before even getting out of bed. Without thinking, you swipe through the screen, checking messages, social media, and news, trying to fill the silence of the morning. This small ritual, so common today, reflects something much bigger: the existential void that seems to be a hallmark of modern life. We live in a world that offers us more comfort and options than any previous generation, and yet, we've never felt so disconnected. Carl Jung described this as a void of meaning, a state where people are surrounded by distractions, but still feel something essential is missing. The question is, are we distracting ourselves to avoid confronting what's truly lacking in our lives? Think about the daily cycle of dependence on social media. Every like is a small dose of dopamine, a momentary relief from restlessness. But like any superficial fix, it fades quickly, leaving us even more anxious. The same applies to excessive consumption. Whether it's buying something new or diving into endless entertainment, we're often trying to escape the discomfort of being alone with our own thoughts. Modern consumerism has turned our deepest longings for love, connection, and purpose into products. But what happens when purpose can't be bought? When likes, followers, or material things fail to fill the void? Jung might argue that this is where modern man loses his way. Not for lack of options, but for not knowing where to look. The uncomfortable truth is that the existential void cannot be filled from the outside in. It demands that we connect with something deeper: our values, our passions, and our genuine relationships. And perhaps this is why it's so frightening, because deep down, we know there are no shortcuts. Picture a wanderer lost in the desert. He walks under the scorching sun, thirsty, until he spots what looks like an oasis. Desperate, he runs toward it and dives into the water, only to realize it's a mirage. Yet, he keeps returning to the same place, hoping that this time his thirst will be quenched. This is the cycle of addiction, a desperate search for something that seems to promise relief but never truly satisfies. William James, one of the founders of modern psychology, wrote that alcohol's grip on humanity comes from the glimpse of something excellent, though fleeting. This applies to any addiction. Every dose, every gamble, every swipe on a screen offers a brief, fleeting sense of transcendence, as though we're touching something greater. But, like the desert mirage, the feeling fades quickly, leaving us even thirstier. What if, in truth, addictions are misguided spiritual quests? Gabor Maté suggests that they are attempts to escape suffering and find a place where we feel whole. The irony, however, is that the more we seek relief in external things, the more we disconnect from ourselves. At its core, we aren't seeking the substance, the behavior, or the distraction. We are seeking connection with our deeper selves and the world around us. Overcoming addiction, then, is more than breaking a habit. It's a journey to understand what we're truly searching for. It's like rediscovering water in the desert, not in an illusory oasis, but in a deep well hidden within us. Not all addictions are obvious. Some disguise themselves as virtues, cloaked in the language of productivity, success, or even health. While addictions like alcohol or drugs are readily recognized, there are behaviors that society not only accepts but actively encourages, such as overworking, exercising compulsively, or relentlessly chasing external achievements. But deep down, are these habits any different from other addictions? Imagine someone who never takes a vacation because they can't stop working. To many, this person is admirable, a model of dedication. But if we look closer, perhaps they're simply running away from themselves. In this case, work becomes a way to avoid the emptiness or loneliness that emerges when there are no distractions. Gabor Maté captures this perfectly when he says, "Any passion can become an addiction." After all, what separates a healthy habit from a compulsive behavior is the intention behind it. Think about addiction to physical exercise. While it may appear healthy on the surface, it can become an obsession with control, a relentless pursuit of validation or perfection. And that raises an important question. If the goal is well-being, why do so many people who achieve their ideal body still feel dissatisfied? These invisible addictions are particularly insidious because, unlike more obvious ones, they often earn applause instead of warnings. Yet the fundamental question remains, are we doing this because it brings us joy, or are we trying to fill a void? The line between passion and compulsion is thin, and crossing it, often unknowingly, can lead us into the same cycle of frustration and disconnection as any other addiction. if addiction is a message, perhaps it tells us as much about society as it does about the individual. We live in a world that prizes productivity above all else, where time is money and distraction is a billion-dollar industry. In this context, addictions arise not only as personal responses, but also as reflections of a culture that often disconnects us from ourselves. Compare communal societies with those marked by individualism, in cultures where a strong sense of belonging exists, where people share responsibilities and celebrate together. Rates of addiction tend to be lower. In contrast, in individualistic contexts, where personal success is glorified, loneliness and competition often create fertile ground for compulsive behaviors. After all, how can one find comfort when everything around them encourages an endless pursuit of more? More success, more validation, more consumption. Carl Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, a concept that applies well here. A society's values shape not only the behaviors of its individuals but also their voids. In a culture that bombards us with images of perfection and promises of instant happiness, it's no wonder so many of us end up feeling inadequate. How can we resist the urge to numb ourselves with distractions when everything around us screams that we must always keep moving? Addiction, then, is not just a personal problem. It's a symptom of a disconnected society. When we examine the cultural roots that shape our behaviors, we see that breaking the cycle also means questioning the values we follow without thinking. Perhaps the cure for addiction, in the end, begins with a society that values being more than having. Overcoming addiction is not just about giving up a habit. It's a process of self-discovery. Imagine your mind and emotions as a house. Over the years, you've accumulated things, left corners neglected, and ignored the cracks. Addiction is like the dust that collects in the spaces you avoid cleaning. To transform this space, you must first face the mess. The first step to breaking the cycle is seeing clearly. It sounds simple, but is deeply challenging. After all, admitting the problem is like opening the windows of a dark room, letting the light expose what's inside. Carl Jung referred to this as individuation, the process of integrating the repressed parts of the psyche. What we ignore within ourselves often resurfaces in ways we can't control. Recognizing and embracing these parts is essential to initiating change. And here comes an important question. Are you willing to face what's behind the addiction? Often, it's easier to stay in the cycle than to confront the pain and emptiness it hides. But, much like cleaning a house, the effort is rewarding. Every corner you tidy, every part of yourself you accept, brings a sense of lightness and clarity. Breaking the cycle also requires patience and self-compassion. It's not a transformation that happens overnight, yet every small step forward, every decision to open up and understand rather than avoid, is a move toward a freer, more authentic life. None of us is an island. When it comes to overcoming addiction, human connection can be as vital as any therapeutic method. Consider the cycle of isolation. The more someone feels trapped in addiction, the more shame pushes them away from others. But it's precisely in the space where shame ends that healing begins. Groups like Alcoholics Anonymous are a powerful example of this. In these spaces, stories are shared not to seek approval, but to build empathy. When someone stands up and says, "I understand what you're going through," it breaks the isolation and creates a space of acceptance. This acceptance is crucial because addiction often feeds on feelings of inadequacy and disconnection. Research shows that support networks not only reduce relapses, but also improve overall mental health. When we're surrounded by people who see us beyond our mistakes, we gain the strength to face our struggles. It's like being part of a team. The journey is personal, but having people cheering for you makes all the difference. Social connection, however, isn't limited to formal groups. It can come from friends, family, or even a new community you choose to build. In the end, social support reminds us of a simple, yet profound truth. The opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. What if, instead of fighting addiction, you simply stopped and sat with it? It sounds counterintuitive, but this is the power of presence and acceptance. Most of us try to escape pain, but rarely consider facing it head-on. Addiction invites us to do exactly that, to look at our wounds, impulses, and emptiness through the lens of mindfulness. Practices like mindfulness, teach us that we don't need to react to every impulse that arises. It's like watching a storm through a window. Instead of being swept away by the wind and rain, you can simply observe, knowing the storm will eventually pass. When we do this with our addictions, we begin to see that they don't hold as much power as we thought. They are merely symptoms, not the root cause of our suffering. Gabor Maté argues that true transformative power lies in bringing awareness to our habits. This means asking yourself, why am I doing this? What am I really trying to avoid or seek? This level of attention allows us to move beyond the behavior itself and explore the emotions and experiences fueling it. It's like picking up the end of a thread and following it all the way to the root of the problem. In the end, cultivating awareness isn't just about breaking free from addiction. It's about rediscovering who you truly are. It's an invitation to stop running from yourself and begin embracing who you are, completely, with all your imperfections and strengths. After all, it's in that space of acceptance that true transformation can occur. Addiction is more than just a behavior. It's a lens through which we can view our pain, our emptiness, and perhaps a pathway to filling those voids. For many, this idea might feel uncomfortable. After all, who wants to confront what lies behind something that brings so much suffering? But, like a crack in the wall revealing what's hidden beneath the plaster, addiction can be the opening that allows us to see something we've avoided for too long. Perhaps the greatest lesson addiction teaches is to force us to stop and investigate. It shows us where we've been seeking relief in the wrong places, but it also points to what truly matters. As Carl Jung said, the journey of individuation, the process of fully integrating who we are, begins with the courage to face the parts of ourselves we avoid, and addiction, in its persistence, is one of those parts. Uncovering what lies behind an addiction isn't a simple task. It's a process that requires vulnerability, patience, and above all, compassion. But within that journey lies an invitation, the chance to create something new from the cracks, to rebuild what has been damaged, and to find a deeper sense of meaning in our lives. In the end, addiction doesn't have to be the villain of the story. It can be the teacher, the unexpected guide that pushes us toward genuine transformation. And by accepting this invitation, we create space not only to heal our wounds, but also to reconnect with what truly matters. If these reflections resonated with you, feel free to leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, how you view this topic, and what it awakened in you. This exchange is where the dialogue truly begins, and perhaps where transformation might emerge. If you think this conversation could help others, share this video. And if you'd like to continue exploring topics like this, stick around. This is a space where we seek more questions than answers, because it's in asking the right questions that we find the most meaningful paths forward.